So most of the bills that went the way of the Banshee are safe too, but there's still some concern that we have about these things called gut and replace. Joining us as we wind down to the really important tail end of the latest legislative session, Representative Aaron Johanson with going up. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
What are you going to do when you don't have to get up at dark 30 every day and walk down to that big square building?
Breathe a huge sigh of relief.
Yeah,
I'm sure the rest of Hawaii will when we don't all convene.
I am a little concerned that the big sigh of relief that some people are feeling right now may be a bit premature. I'm worried about some things that are still left over. But let's talk about some of the things that went away and maybe why they did. Mm-hmm. I know that most organizations were pretty confident that the early learning package that the governor was coming up with was going to, even though it was a little bumpy, was going to sail through. And at the last minute, I guess Friday, it was shelved. Is it shelved? Go ahead.
I was going to say not exactly.
Not exactly.
Different parts of it. You know, it was originally, as proposed by the governor and the administration, it was a 3-bill package. One starting with a constitutional amendment that would allow them to divert public funding to private preschools, and then there were the 2 bills subsequent to that passage that would be for implementation. One to target the junior K folks who are late borns who may not necessarily be served by the present system, and then the permanent creation of a much larger 4-year-old and maybe 3-year-old publicly funded preschool program.
Okay, because most of us were looking at that number.
So the second phase, that larger phase, is not moving. So
okay, that's what I was getting at, because a lot of us were thinking of 110 million, and
more.
Yeah, I mean a lot more. Yeah. But what it looks like going forward is the legislative effort to say, look, we realize that there's some things that have to be done. So here's like a $6 million program, right? Mm-hmm. Does this mean that it's not necessarily going to go away, but in its present form didn't get the support needed? What do you think?
I think what is happening is different folks are trying to salvage what they can. Quite honestly, it's not even sure if tomorrow when we vote on the constitutional amendment, which would be the enabling legislation, sort of the foundation, if you will,
right,
for any future programs, even if that will pass. And so it's lost a lot of momentum. There are a lot of different concerns. An unusual alliance of people who feel like there might be some added conversation that needs to be needed before we start passing a lot of these things, amending the Constitution.
Doesn't that, Aaron, happen a lot, that a bill has a bunch of merits in it, but a bunch of problems, whether it be language or whatnot? I happen to be speaking with Will Okabe of the HSTA, and there's another bill that's going to be that's being debated this week and to come to a vote. And this is the I don't want, for want of a better expression, I want to call it the voucher bill.
This is the constitutional amendment that we were just speaking.
Yeah, but when we said that, I knew that, but you say that one's the one that apparently is dead.
No, that's not the one that's dead. The one that's dead. So there's 3 bills. Okay. The last bill that would have established the big costly program is not moving, but the constitutional amendment enabling legislation is still up for a vote tomorrow, as is the junior K smaller piece that would now expand preschool open doors to target the late-born 4-year-olds.
Okay, and what I'm guessing is that just the word voucher conjures up a lot of misunderstanding by a lot of people. But aren't there an awful lot of people and constituents, I'm sure, that pay after-tax dollars to get their child educated in a private school? They would like some form of recognition for the fact that they pay taxes.
Well, and I think what is interesting about the constitutional amendment is some people on labor grounds feel like it's a voucher, and there are some groups that oppose it. But there are also a lot of religious preschools that feel like the problem with this constitutional amendment is it would fundamentally alter how they educate or have to educate if they were to, if this program were to.
Yeah, and that means, so for those that don't understand that, is because it would sort of dictate curriculum.
I mean, the Attorney General has issued a memo saying, there are all kinds of things you can't do. Here's how you have to divorce some of your curriculum if it's infused with religion. Some of the things that are difficult, quite frankly, for preschool providers. If you're a Catholic preschool provider, all of a sudden to say, okay, we're going to, alter something that's fundamental to our curriculum.
Yeah, and so that being said, it would just be saying, well, okay, you can do that, but don't expect any help. In other words, you're sailing your own course.
You might not be eligible under
okay.
this established program.
Okay, now there was another bill, and I'm not quite sure what part of it survived, but even though I normally don't take questions off the air, and by the way, if you're looking on any particular bill, I'm going to guess, Aaron, that you're going to really tell people, look, speak up right this minute or forever hold your peace, because this is really
this is the crunch time. This is really really the crunch time, because the House and the Senate will be convening tomorrow to take final votes, and so both chambers. What has happened is we just finished conference committees where, in theory, the House and the Senate hashed out their differences, and now we're voting on the same thing tomorrow. But these agreements, these agreed to drafts, have to pass out of both houses tomorrow in order to become a bill. So there are still some that are controversial. Quite honestly, I think great for Hawaii. A lot of the most controversial ones are now dead and lying on a conference table somewhere, just haven't made it.
Things like gambling and some of the other stuff. Okay, now there's one, however, that is very meaningful to a lot of people, particularly those that have seen a school in their area close for whatever reason, and that they're hoping and praying that there's going to be some miracle if the school's going to reopen and be full of kids again. But they're part of the bill that dealt with the dealing of leasing out of school lands to some. That is still alive. Some of that's still going.
It is. The 21st Century Schools bill is still alive.
And essentially, for the like me, what does that one mean? What is it? What are the yays and the nays, the pros and the cons on that?
They've limited the scope quite a bit, so it would be, a more like a pilot project type of thing where you have, at most, several locations, and they're primarily looking at, while they haven't targeted schools, we're looking at the kinds of schools. I think the authors of the bill envision schools like Jefferson or Waikiki Elementary that are right next to apartment buildings or hotels that may have a lot of land because they were built when we had spacious open campuses.
When we had land.
And looking at using a piece of some of that land to redevelop, potentially to produce income for that school, so that it's sort of self-generating and can take care of some of the capital improvement projects for that school and just to invest in that school.
So far, the people that I've spoken with, Aaron, they like the word pilot project, because a pilot project means, okay, we do this and we take a look and we give everybody, all the stakeholders, a chance to take a look at how this went before we make permanent decisions that might make us, get into something that we regret later.
And I think part of the reason they limited the scope of this bill is because there are, quite frankly, a lot of workability concerns.
Yeah.
What gets put adjacent to the school on school land? How does that comport with the mission of educating children in terms of their safety and the environment? Whether or not you're taking up some of the space that they might need to play on or run on, so that they're healthy. All those kinds of questions end up being able to be better assessed once you have some experience.
You know what else I heard, and your thoughts on this is that because of like No Child Left Behind and a lot of other things, some of the schools had to cancel programs and concentrate on other things. And if a lot of them had to do with music appreciation, physical education, and they're saying, wait a minute, what if times get better and we can expand to where these kids are going to play soccer if somebody's got a condo on it?
Most schools nowadays cannot afford, it's rare to have a full-time dedicated PE teacher, especially at the elementary level, or a music teacher, and that's largely because a lot of them are having to focus on passing the HSA. And, there's nothing wrong with preparing for evaluative mechanisms and measures that test whether or not we're basically equipping our children. But at the same time, I think educators question, how are you educating the whole child if you're not able to do some of those things?
Okay, or hear, I should say, both sides of the story. Aaron Johanson's in the house, and you can be too. Remember, no email. I'm getting email on this, but no email today. Calls only at 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. Some of the things we're going to talk about are the very important bills that are still out there. And I'm going to ask a little bit about this gut and replace business, because we know that a certain amount of that is happening, and we want to let you know what it is. Right now, though, let's check with traffic. Mail in more on a busy Monday morning as you get back in the saddle. What do you got?
KHNR. You're listening to the Mike Buck Show on Hawaii's Intelligent Talk, AM 690, KHNR.
Just like that, we come from outer space to inner space. The legislative session sort of is coming to an end, and that doesn't mean that the things are, like totally winded down, because they haven't yet. They will in a bit. Biggest question, of course, comes from, do you think they're going to make it on time? Because we know how much extra sessions cost and who's going to pay for it and all of that stuff. And I know it's hard to say, but is it progressing at, you think, a rate where it's probably going to close up on time?
I do think it's going to close on time. I mean, everything has abided by normal protocols. Lots of things actually this session have finished faster. Some of that is that the House and the Senate are getting along better than they have in past years. So we may not always agree, but there's just been general consistency in sticking to timelines.
I think this is very important. I think that it's almost a milestone. I mean, I think that we've created, and I know that there's always been this, and we spoke of this when I first introduced you to this audience when the session first started, Aaron. And by the way, Aaron Johanson is the minority speaker of the House of Representatives, and we talked in the very beginning about the disparaging difference in percentages of Republicans and Democrats. Certainly in the House, in the Senate, where it's 24-1, and in the House where it's not a whole bunch better, really.
Yeah, 44-7.
But nonetheless, and especially some of the folks were newbies. A lot's been accomplished. It must be, from the minority party standpoint, Aaron, encouraging.
I think so, most definitely. I mean, being able to have our members have a seat at the table, have our ideas considered, is remarkable progress. And I think that's honestly what people want: functional government. And everybody's part of a political party or has some thought or some idea. But at the end of the day, I think part of the adult, mature thing to do for Hawaii and for all of its people is to be able to work together to get something done. And in that respect, I think we've seen a good deal of more fiscal prudence than we've seen in the past. I mean, we spent $50 million to recapitalize the Hurricane Relief Fund, another $50 million to recapitalize the Rainy Day Fund. Both of these are important for our bonding.
A lot of money, and very important for our bonding. Right?
Yeah, we put down about $217 million over 2 years to help pay down some of the unfunded liabilities. All these, I think, are important commitments fiscally to say that the legislature is taking a more conservative posture with respect to our outstanding obligations.
I know that you didn't bring their working under different speakers. However, I know that there's a lot of controversy in the beginning of the session as to who the majority speaker was going to be. I mean, Calvin Say's going forward or somebody else. And as it turned out, Joe Suki apparently has, in appearances to those of us in the media anyway, been an important bridge to include members of the minority party.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. It wouldn't have happened without Speaker Joe's leadership.
And some people say, Aaron, that this is sort of maybe as he's wizened in his years, that he is not so much pounding my way or the highway, that he is willing to do discussions and things, and that probably is good for everybody.
I think if he were here, he'd smile at you with his characteristic glint and say he's mellowed out a bit. With age.
I was going to say, because I know the old Joe. I go back a lot of years to Joe Suki, and a lot of people call him Van Cam Suki because of, but nonetheless, he is a very principled guy, but from what I understand, open to discussion.
Very much so. I mean, a lot of his signature ideas, well, he wants to push them. It doesn't mean that the House has had to push them, whether it's gambling or red light cameras or some of his other ideas. And, what I think one of the things that a lot of the listeners out there can celebrate is a lot of the worst ideas that typically have a much higher chance at passage, most of them are dead this session. So it's been... Depending on your perspective, I think there are some good ideas that are coming out, but it's a far more benign session, at least in terms of hurting businesses, hurting working families, than some legislative sessions have been in the past.
I know that some of that is thanks to the Council of Revenues and thanks to that we have received the bounty of more people coming in on airplanes than we expected.
Definitely helps to have a growing economy.
Yeah, and in the early part of the session, we spoke about several things, and particularly the number of bills that were suggesting changes, alterations, increasing in the GET. Are there any bills left that have anything to do with the GET?
There are a few bills that would, but most of them have to do with continuing exemptions from the general excise tax. So whether it's respect to
solar credits, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or like if you're with the military and you receive TRICARE is exempted from being taxed by the general excise tax, even though other health plans are. So, but in terms of an actual tax increase, no, not in the general excise tax, and most of the tax increases at this point are dead. Whether it's the soda tax, the
gasoline,
internet tax, the barrel tax is also gone. So most of these cost of living increases that would really, really exacerbate our cost of living, thankfully, are not alive.
I think that because maybe it's a non-election year, who knows what, that isn't the easiest way to go or the easiest pot to look for is that pot. I mean, if it's because of the mandate of a balanced budget, which we all have as homeowners, the only way you can make your numbers is to increase, spending, increase taxes or reduce spending. And it looks like the latter has happened a little bit.
Well, and what is a positive thing is that most of the tax and fee increases come in the non-election year because most of people in the building hope that everyone forgets about it by the even-numbered years when they have to run for re-election. So that's encouraging as well. If we're looking at some of the bad bills that are coming out of this session and they're far more benign than usual, we're certainly not out of the woods because there's no cap on bad ideas that emanate out of the square building.
And gang, we do have some of those specifically to discuss. I know that another bill that didn't make it in, and I don't know if there's any left that do, was when I talked about increased revenue. One way was to allow some form of gaming, whether it be shipboard or whether it be lotteries or whether it be one casino in Waikiki. It seems like once again they pretty much settled down to
no form of gambling is at all on the it's never really been on the table, and it's definitely not passing.
Okay, now the next one is that there were several positions and several bills dealing in this session with marijuana, and from what I understand, most of them are gone.
Some of them are gone. There are some that we'll be voting on tomorrow that would change the administration from the Department of Public Safety to the Department of Health, change the way they classify some of the plants, whether they're mature, immature. I mean, things that you learn. I tell you one thing, Mike. You learn a lot of things in this job that you never would know otherwise.
Sure.
And so there are a few medical marijuana bills, 2 of them actually, that we're voting on tomorrow. But I think some of the most, whether it's decriminalizing marijuana, those bills are not alive. And those bills are thankfully dead.
Before the news break, which is coming up in a minute, I want to go back to the early childhood stuff again, because I do know that there are lots of people that worked really, really hard on this. And in the end, most of what they're asking for is being tabled or shelved, at least for now. But I would be almost certain that there would be wheels still in motion as soon as the session is over to rekindle some of these ideas.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it's I think this is singularly one of the governor's biggest signature initiatives. And so, I think every administration always tries to recalibrate, refocus, and if they don't get their way, figure out another way around it.
Yep. Reload. Okay, we got more coming up, including we're going to give Aaron a chance to explain some of the things that he's working hard for or against, and your opportunity to participate as well. But the only way you can do it during this session is by phone, and that number is 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. News coming up. We'll be right back. Oh, you're down under. Well, it is 7:35, and we're looking at the legislature coming to an end this week. We have asked Rep. Johanson to come back in. We'll maybe have a couple folks come back in next week and talk about recapping the session, because it still is pretty exciting. And it's never too late. Even though I don't take email, is it too late to comment? And I think, Aaron, you got to let people know that it really is never too late. I mean, even after the session is over, you certainly expect constituents to still come up with, what's on their mind and everything else. However, it is the 11th hour, and I know that, the best way to communicate is just to do it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we're getting a barrage of emails, and quite honestly, it's made a difference in some of the bad bills. I think a great example of that, of a bad bill that died, and largely because there was such a uniform opposition late in the session, was HB 634, where it would have regulated how you as a business owner would have been able to divest or buy another business. Sometimes it's called the worker retention bill, where you are obligated to retain all the workers of the previous predecessor company,
which is hard sometimes. Sometimes people want to say, you know what, the reason why I was able to get this business because it wasn't doing well, and I got it, and I'm going to make changes.
Right. And so that died in conference committee, but it was helpful that the business community at large and as individuals sent email after email, lobbied the building, came out, called. So that can still be done by tomorrow. Yeah.
Isn't that a good example, Aaron, of a bill that a lot of small business owners wouldn't have even known about? I mean, but for the fact that somebody said, wow, I was looking at this, and hey, this is going to affect you. Now, let me ask you this. Did you personally, and you don't have to give a specific example, but did you personally this year change your mind on a particular bill based on input?
I have. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon all legislators to certainly know what you stand for and stick to your core, but also leave room for that conversation and that dialogue, because quite honestly, I don't know everything, and I think the building itself would be a healthier
That's a refreshing
place.
thing to hear from a politician, folks. I think, as a matter of fact, this might be the first on my program ever where somebody in politics says, I don't know everything.
Yeah, well, I will reiterate it again. There are a lot of things I don't know and a lot of things that I could be wrong about, and I'm willing to leave that possibility open. And I think all good legislators do that, recognizing that you need to be informed by the experts and the people who are in the trenches, who may have a different experience or a different perspective.
Yeah, and they are
you might
the
read
experts.
about. Yeah.
How about this one? And I think this is critical. There are a lot of things that come up. For instance, somebody that was just listening to you talk about that last bill for small business. If they're not a small business owner, they don't. What do they know? So it's safe to say that not every legislator is aware of everything that every bill is pertaining to, because it may have been up until this session not Aaron Johanson's interest to put any thought into something.
Right. It may not be somebody's raison d'etre, but this is a prime example. I've seen this bill 3 times. I've only been here for 3 sessions, and I've seen it every single session. It's never progressed this far, which is why I don't think there's been this massive outcry. But because it was getting close to the finish line in conference committee, all of a sudden everybody's saying, "What is this crazy bill, and what are you guys doing?" But it never rose to the surface before, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I've seen it every single session, and I haven't seen this public outcry before. So sometimes there's so many. When you're looking at thousands of bills, it's difficult for the business community or even individuals to always laser in on every single thing that might affect their interests.
And my big problem has always been with that it says a bill pertaining to, and if it's not something you're into, you don't know what's in there. Let's go to the phone. I got somebody that's got multiple choice questions about a bunch of stuff. Joe is in Paoa joining us this morning. Say hello to Rep. Johansson. Joe, good morning.
Hello, Mike and Representative Johansson.
Morning, Joe.
I had, you already mentioned 2 of the issues I wanted to ask you about, which I'm for, marijuana legalization and gambling legalization. But I also wanted to ask you about GMOs labeling. I heard on NPR that we were considering labeling, which won't cost anything. People change the companies change their labels all the time, and so it's a people's right to know. And then they said that they were going to make an exception for locally grown GMO foods, which that they get the local farmers to say that they're a lobbyist, but they're really signed on to the Monsanto corporations, the GMO papayas, the Roundup, and so forth. So what's the status on the GMO label?
I think
that's a good one, Joe. Thanks for your question.
I remember that bill from Finance. I don't know if it got out of both chambers. I remember us passing it on to the Senate. What I am more familiar with is I know that rezos have been adopted that actually ask Congress to take it up at a federal level so that there can be a uniform, whether it's a uniform labeling law so that all companies know that they just need to put it on their products no matter what, that something is a genetically modified organism. That's definitely passed out of the House as a resolution.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Joe, were you one of the many? Because from what I understand, that debate was a very passionate one. It was. With a lot of people, small-time guys particularly, that want to blame the big seed companies for this entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I mean, and it's really interesting, fascinating. Again, genetically modified organisms were not something that heretofore I thought a whole lot about, but it's been a big issue this session. It's had a lot of attention, and you have a lot of passionate people. You have those people who feel like it is a truth in labeling and a consumer's right to know, and how that mixes with those who feel like, we're just trying to farm, or we're trying to keep local ag alive, we're trying to be able to export crops, whether it's seed corn or whether it's...
Or GMO papayas going to Japan, right?
Right. Joe was talking about the rainbow
interesting how you got involved in this. I mean, I am one that now looks, I guess maybe because of the nutritional content on labels when I'm shopping, and I agree with you in that how much does it cost that companies change labels every 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about the issue because I feel that it's very detrimental to the environment and to the human health. And on their side, the argument that they give is that, if we put it on the label, then no one's going to buy it. And so, you have to ask yourself, if no one's going to buy it, there must be a reason that when people research this issue, they're just appalled at all the terrible effects. And we have Mike Taylor, head of Monsanto, that's working for the FDI that oversees research on it. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, excuse the pun, Joe. Thanks very much for your call.
Thanks,
It is true when people have something that they can go and get. But my concern is when you do your research, what the source is. And I know that there's an awful lot of people really upset at some of the big companies, and particularly, and I know that this is going to, wasn't there also a bill that had something to do with the identifying of where fish comes from? I don't know if it was this session, but I know it was last one. Label something Hawaiian. Something can't be mahi-mahi if it's not from Hawaii, and that kind of thing.
I don't remember that particular bill this session, but there are always truth in labeling bills, and particularly when they're Hawaii products, there's a lot of impetus all the time to make sure that brand is not misappropriated and used commercially by everybody else that's not actually producing.
Yeah, there was an article in the paper the other day where a guy was going to finally be able to sell some of his papaya to Japan, which is just this huge craving place.
Right.
Is the jury still out on the long-term effects of modifying things or changing things? Is that part of it, do you think?
I think that I've heard this whole session a whole lot of heated debate, and I've heard a whole lot of different things, and I myself am not sure.
Me neither. I've been
I'm not a scientific expert.
Yeah.
And I know I certainly consume a lot of things that are GMO, but I also understand that for some people, there's a legitimate question that can be asked of how hard is it in the nutritional content to decide that it's a GMO. I'm
just like you with regards to that. And particularly when it comes time to look at something like salmon, when a farm raised salmon has been injected with some color, because otherwise it would be like gray, and the other guy would have nice gray. But other than that, I'm looking at, all right, you want to pay $7-8 a pound or $12, and don't most families just say, I'll take the 8?
A lot do. I mean, everybody's got a different set of concerns, and I think that's the beauty of the democratic process. You see all those concerns, and some of them competing on display and duking it out for equal airtime and equal consideration.
That one's going to be back in it. That's a touchy one. I mean,
I'm quite sure. I mean, if given opening day, we heard conch shells, and opening day even was dominated quite a bit by the anti-GMO.
Yeah, and they were certainly there in force. But my thought is this: you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why it's dying at the local level is that maybe it should be taken up nationally, and maybe it should be something that it's like apples to apples, that it's the same legislation in nationwide.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's dying, but I think that's some of the concerns of some folks that, if it's one of those things.
Who trumps who?
It's just easiest rather than a patchwork, 50 different laws by 50 different states that companies are having to comply with, to just perhaps go for a big bite at the apple at the federal level.
All right, it's 7:45, 296-KHNR is the number. That's 296-5467. Rep. Aaron Johanson in the House. And we're going to get down to his favorite things right now. That's coming up. What bills are important to him and which ones he doesn't like much. Your thoughts on it? 296-5467.
KHNR. Now, here's Mike on AM 690 KHNR.
Okay, one of the deals I get, and this is totally off the cuff all the time. In the very beginning of the session, when we invited Aaron Johanson to join us for the session, and we've talked to people on both sides of the political fence all year long and continue to do so. And the deal has always been, okay, we're here to talk about front page stuff and what's in and what's out. However, this is the final time that Aaron and I will be together before the close of the legislative session, which is Thursday, although we'll be back next Monday to sort of recap everything that we've been doing. Right now, this is all about the last several minutes. And I know that you have some things that you really are hoping happen and some things that you hope don't happen. So this is your day. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are important to you and your constituents and as a result to all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there are some, as I said earlier today, there are some actually good ideas emanating from the legislature. And while sometimes they're fewer and far between, because the bad stuff typically gets the most attention, but I think there are some really good changes that are going to help in terms of growing the economy. We have provided some support in terms of either tax credits or mostly tax credits, rather, for things like the Hawaii Growth Initiative meant to spur economic diversification, some help for the film credit and the film and digital media industry to kind of keep that going so that we're out there in the public profile, whether it's with things like Hawaii 5.0 or additional movies filming here, making sure that we don't just have one sector of the economy, that being tourism. So economic growth I think is helpful. The mitigation of a lot of the tax and fee increases will keep the cost of living at least the same. I'm hopeful that in the future we'll be able to actually lower it as opposed to just keep it the same, because it's still way too high. But certainly not exacerbating it is helpful. We've been looking at some things like there's quite a few procurement reform measures on the plate. And I think that's helpful because it gets to how do we best spend the taxpayer dollars in an effective way that gets maximum bang for the buck.
Doesn't that also, Aaron, lead to much more accountability and blue sky as far as being able to see things?
In fact, in terms of accountability, there's some great bills coming out that would allow state government to put up more information to advise the public on how some of government is doing in terms of its performance. And some of there are weird barriers that you don't often think of when you're not in government that precludes sometimes the sharing of information. But there are some bills that would now allow us to share some of that information so people can assess for themselves. There's quite a few transparency and accountability measures in place that would require legislators to disclose their financial interests long before the session is over.
Well, by the way, I saw that one, that there's this one piece that is to do with making PAC groups disclose their top 3 contributors. That would give people follow the money, right? An opportunity to see that.
Voting on that tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's an important one. I mean, because it goes to transparency, what you're talking about. There's another thing, though, and I think that this was the one that would affect the most people, and yet it was the most confusing. And that is, and I know that in your area, it's a growing community, and everybody is, and there's a lot of families out there, and there's a lot of families looking at trying to end their dependency on oil and trying to save money and convert to photovoltaics or solar hot water. What of that is still going, and what of that is gone?
That tax credit bill that would have changed the solar tax credits actually didn't pass out of committee. So for the individual homeowner, the tax rates still apply, at least at the state level. And I can't remember off the top of my head when the federal tax credits lapse. it's a little bit problematic in that some of the industry looking at if you were a big producer, say you were a commercial, trying to commercially make it viable as opposed to just on an individual house level, I think they might have some issues because the credit wasn't changed. So, but that one remains the same. So again, also some help for spurring the renewable energies industry.
There are literally thousands of people that were sitting on the edge of their seats about that one, not just workers in the industry, but homeowners that say, "Hey, without this, I can't do it."
Right.
And with it, I
it's
can't.
Not feasible.
But now all of a sudden, and I'm not sure where this came from. It looks like there's a certain amount of funding available for people to get loans to get the systems that they can get from the power company.
Yeah,
which is go figure.
There's a green loan program that would use some of the existing. Right now, everybody on their electric bill is charged. It's called the public benefit fee, and it's part of the electric bill, and it would divert some of that fee that's already assessed to capitalizing basically a loan program for green infrastructure to make it more affordable and more penetration and critical mass.
Was that one of the ones that was more challenging because of the different parties and so much? It seemed like a big debate.
There was quite a big debate because, one, it begs the question of, is this going to be an added fee? And that was a concern for a lot of the members of our caucus. I think also there needs to be significant debate about, it could be a great idea, but anytime you build a loan program, you also potentially expand liabilities. And so, questioning whether or not there's inherent liabilities that we're taking on, maybe we're biting off more than we can chew, has been a part of that conversation as well. But also balancing that with the we do need to achieve some critical mass in the renewable energies industry, and it may be a way to bring down the cost of living and reduce dependency on oil.
There were a lot of people that were worried about getting exemption to the Jones Act. Is any of that still alive?
I don't believe that resolution is alive. I know our colleague Gene Ward regularly introduces that, and I don't believe it got a hearing.
That being said, what is the most in the couple of minutes that we have left? What is the most favorite bill that you personally would like to see ushered through and approved, and what is the one that you don't like the most? You only get two of these.
It's gonna be a shameless.
And there's so many.
Shameless plug for my own bill.
Please.
There's a procurement reform bill, which basically I think would give us maximum value as opposed to allowing low bidders with poor performances regularly abuse the system.
Yeah, explain that because of change orders or on how to make things different.
Right. What this bill would do, as it came out of conference committee, is it would enable the procuring agency or state government to be able to use different methods instead of just one route that doesn't allow you to consider past performance. So, if you're going to engage in a big complex project, now you have multiple options available to you to say, I want to be able to consider past performance, because if I'm going to spend $50 million and I'm going to go with the Mike Buck Company, I want to make sure that the Mike Buck Company doesn't have a history of regularly
underperforming or non-performing.
Exactly, and just sort of gaming the system and waiting for me to go and prosecute. So I think that will be really helpful for a lot of our schools.
Do you know the number of your own bill?
HB 1374.
Okay.
I do. And then I think, I think I'm just glad that so many of these tax and fee increases are no longer alive. A lot of them have problems and issues, and it's hard to pick my least favorite of all these less favorite tax and fee increases. Okay,
well, let me put it this way. One of the things that we've been sort of forewarned about is the famous gut and replace 12th, last 11th minutes hour stuff. And we're not going to have a chance between now and Thursday to discuss it again. Are we more aware of these now and less likely to let them slip through?
I think post the PLDC, the public in general is very now aware of the gut and replace mechanism, and there were a few attempts at that this past session, but the truth is none of those gut and replace bills survived conference, and so there's a heightened sensitivity to that because it seems like a process foul, and it doesn't seem like it's in the best interest of democracy and openness and transparency. So there's been a lot less of that this session,
and I think that bodes well. Because the more they used to say smoky back room, right? Now at least it's not smoky anymore, but there's still back rooms.
There's still dealings on the side, but that's always going to be the case.
Well, I want to tell you on behalf of our audience,
it doesn't have to be, but people need to demand that it's not.
That's right, demand it. I certainly want to tell you that it's been just a joy to get to know you a little bit this session,
Same here.
And thanks so much for being so candid and stuff. And I really look forward to what's next, and that is let's give a good critique of the session, and we will have had. From Thursday, when you close, assuming it's going to close, you'll have a couple of days to digest and give me a list of good and bad and the ugly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have it for you.
Aaron Johanson.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
When we come back, something really, really cool. This is, I was telling you about this earlier, a new local science camp for teens launching this summer on the Big Island. Science Camps of America takes Hawaii to the outdoor classroom. And we love that. We're going to learn about it when we come back. But right now, it's time for our news. Once again, Aaron Johanson will be back next week. And we'll talk about what a year that it was. In the meantime, if you want to join us in the next part of the program, new local science camp, what that's all about. It's a new camp set to launch this summer on the Big Island. And we'll tell you more about that right after our news break here at the top of the hour on KHNR, Hawaii's Intelligent Talk, Monday morning. It's 8 o'clock, Hawaii.